Testing, testing.
Scheduled to see Sacramento when they do.
Why we go up our legislative?
I don't know why they're going to have all this.
It sounds like fire.
Well, I don't know either, but they're trying to get everybody, I guess, on board.
Maybe it's Alan. No, really. I'm serious. Ask him.
What's that?
Kind of smell like smoke.
What? Yeah, I did. Just now.
The new diet.
Breakfast?
That's the mid-morning. Every couple, 3 hours, I eat something.
I see your favorite guys here.
Where are you? What happened to my board of supervisors? Come on. Just the works.
Pulling 17 for separate. That's the only one.
That's what I like. It's a pile of stuff.
Good morning. Welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting. Please join me in the flag salute, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, we'll start off with Board of Supervisor matters. Supervisor Vanderpool.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ennis. A couple of events that I wanted to go over that are upcoming this week. First of all, today at noon at the Heritage Complex, the Tulare Kiwanis always has a Farmer of the Year recognition ceremony, and that does take place today. recognizing family farms and farmers throughout the area for their contributions to the community. Today they will be honoring the Bell R. Martin family dairy and the Martin family and brothers who currently operate that dairy. So congratulations to that family. Also, this Friday at 6:30 at the Wyndham in Visalia, the Habitat for Humanity will be hosting their annual birdhouse auction fundraiser, and that's always a great event, and they do a wonderful job with that. So that's all I have for this morning, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Cox?
Well, last week and yesterday ended up with 3 retirement board meetings, one for the board itself, one for our admin, and one for a property owners association. This Wednesday we'll have, or tomorrow morning, we'll have the Tulare County Volunteers recognition breakfast at 8:30 at the Lamplighter. Be recognizing some folks who volunteered during the TC volunteers period. So looking forward to attending that and seeing how many folks and what they did. Thursday at 11:30 is the Latinas in Law Enforcement event, an annual event put on by Lolly Mahano to recognize Latinas working in law enforcement, so I'll be happy to attend that. And then Friday at 6 p.m., right before the Habitat for Humanity event, there is a Fire Academy graduation, so I'll be at that for a short time before we head out to the birdhouse auction. And that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Supervisor Worthley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple Fridays ago, we had a groundbreaking ceremony for the London Library. Well attended, good crowd of folks that were there, and I want to thank county family that was there. There were many people, including Rita Woodard back there, and at that time they had moved quite well, moved forward with the project. But since that time, I've seen some pictures where they've laid the asphalt for the parking lot, and the module building has been moved onto the site. And so it is indeed moving right along, and the people of London are quite excited about that, as they well should be. This evening I'll be leaving to go to Sacramento for some meetings with the Bryant Waters, the San Joaquin River Authority as I chair, and we have meetings scheduled tomorrow to meet with several different people with the Bureau and different folks to promote that project going forward. And I hope everybody had a great Easter. Thank you. That's all I have to share.
Thank you. Supervisor Rashida?
Last week I attended the Sequoia Conservancy open house, grand opening. The Conservancy is in Three Rivers in a new location. The goal of the Conservancy is to get an organization comparable to what Yosemite has, to where we can start bringing kids up to visit the Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park. And last week I also drove by Plainview. Our park, the fence is up, and it looks like we're getting roads done, so we're getting very close to being able to open that park. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, this tomorrow I'll be attending the volunteer meeting, breakfast over at the Lamplighter as well, and we'll be speaking there. That afternoon, we're going to be meeting in Porterville with the Water Resources Board and the Governor's Office, continuing to work out how we're going to attack the east side of Porterville's infrastructure and getting water to them. So those are very important meetings. Friday morning, I'll have First Friday Coffee, Porterville Chamber. And then Friday night, I'll be coming over to the boardroom here for the fire department's graduation and promotional ceremonies. So looking forward to that. Charlie Norman, our new fire chief. And been out checking on the Deer Creek Bridge, and it looks like it's functional. I was out there the other day. All the approaches are in. The asphalt is down. I think they just need to get a few little specifications done on it, and it's going to be ready to roll. But looking at that bridge, and it's 400 feet long, it's quite a bridge, and that's taken a Band-Aid off and put a cure and a fix on that project. We won't have to revisit it hopefully in the future. So continue to watch Lake Success. It continues to fill. Glad to see up over 32 to 35,000 acre feet of water in there, and according to the engineer out there, he says we may get to 60. If we could get some more weather patterns through, we might even fill it this year. So That's going to be great, not only for recreational area, but also to help our farmers and to help our groundwater situation here in the Central Valley. So looking forward to that. Okay, that's all I have. We'll move forward to item number 2. Then a proclamation adopting the resolution proclaiming the first week of April 2016 to be Healthy Tulare County Week and coinciding with National Public Health Week and making this year's theme Tulare County's Healthiest Community 2030. Dr. Haas.
Good morning, Chairman Ennis and members of the board. Thank you very much for proclaiming next week, the first week of April, as Healthy Tulare County Week, as you mentioned, coinciding with National Public Health Week. The Health Advisory Committee, along with the Public Health Department, have collaborated with over 20 different organizations to organize activities throughout the week. We've worked with businesses, community organizations, schools, and many healthcare organizations to bring about 59 activities organized across the week. The activities include opportunities for physical activities such as dancing and walking, and healthy opportunities for healthy eating and demonstrations on healthy cooking, and also opportunities for health screenings in the community. We'll also include during the week some work which is ongoing for a community health assessment and community health improvement plan for the health department. And this will include a convening on April 4th of over 80 organizations across the county from many different sectors to discuss and assess how we collaborate to deliver the essential public health functions for the county. And also we will have community focus groups to hear from community members about their health concerns throughout each district in the county. So all the activities, you have a handout with the schedule of activities. It's just been sort of finalized last night. So all the activities will be posted on the TCHHSA website with a map where all they're at. And I'd like to also mention that Tulare County Area Transit and Visalia Transit are providing free transportation to any Healthy Tulare County Week activity. And we will have enrollment opportunities, cards available at all the locations for people to enroll in Alert TC so they can either enroll or update their information. So we make sure we're all connected. So here to receive the proclamation with me are 2 members of the Health Advisory Committee, Nan Arnold from TCOE and Nelson Gonzalez from Environmental Health.
Supervisor Vanderpool will be presenting the proclamation.
See if we can get this door unlocked and have you guys come over here and join me. You know, I got an email yesterday that asked me if I wanted to present this, and I said, well, is it because I'm the healthiest member of the Board of Supervisors or because you have a lack of interest? But they actually just wanted me to do this because I've been very much excited about my chairmanship and being a part of the Tulare County Health Advisory Committee. It's doing a great job for this county, and sure appreciate all the hard work that you put in as members of the Health Advisory Committee, as well as the other members. So real quick, I just want to go over this proclamation recognizing April 4th through the 10th, 2016 as Healthy Tulare County Week. Whereas public health is what we as a society do to collectively assure the conditions for people to be healthy, and a strong public health system is critical for sustaining and improving community health. And whereas evidence-based public health and prevention policies result in healthier communities and a reduced cost of treating disease. And whereas health is determined by factors such as social policy, environment, and education, new policies should be assessed to understand potential health impacts. And whereas improving access to healthy foods and beverages, reducing the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages, encouraging physical activity, prohibiting tobacco, Ashita, in public places, reducing excessive alcohol consumption, and implementing high-impact, quality clinical and preventative services will improve the health of the county. And whereas preventable chronic diseases such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes are responsible for millions of premature deaths in the U.S. each year. And whereas research has found that students' health affects their grades, attendance, behavior, and whether they graduate, healthy children learn better. And whereas research shows that the right investments in workplace wellness programs can reap positive impacts on workers' health and health care costs, making prevention good business sense. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Tulare County Board of Supervisors does hereby declare the week of April 4th, 2016 to be Healthy Tulare County Week to coincide with National Public Health Week. The Board of Supervisors calls upon residents, public and private institutions, community organizations, businesses, and schools in Tulare County to recommit our community to increasing awareness and understanding of all the determinants of health, and for all of us to take steps individually and in our communities toward better health for all. Signed by Alan Ashita, Pete Vanderpool, Phil Cox, Steve Worthley, and Mike Ennis. Thank you very much, and again, thank you to my members of the Health Advisory Committee for all the hard work you do for Tulare County residents. Stand back real quick, and we'll take a quick photo.
Okay.
Shift. I kind of forced you over that.
Yeah,
Sorry about that. This is where technology's going. You see she's got the camera on her shoulder and she's taking pictures with her phone.
With her phone, with her iPhone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. When you look at Tulare County and the statistics, 51% of the people in Tulare County have diabetes. So we need to look at your mom and your dad and your brothers and sisters, and if that runs in your family, you need to take extra precautions. I know it runs in my family. I've been very fortunate so far to have staved it off, but that is a big factor in Tulare County is diabetes. Okay, moving on. Let's go to item number 3.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, that's an action.
It is an
item,
action
sir.
item. I'll move for approval, Mr.
Second.
Chair.
Moved by Supervisor Vanderpool, second by Supervisor Cox. The vote is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, let's move to item number 3, presentation regarding the update on the Economic Development Corporation of Tulare County. Mr. Vavada.
Okay. So good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. For the record, I'm Craig Vavada, serve on the City Council in Tulare. I'm also the chairman of the Economic Development Corporation of Tulare County. Presenting with me today is Monty Reyes, serves on the Porterville City Council. Scott Harness, Vice Mayor of Dinuba, Warren Gubler, the Vice Mayor of Visalia, and Randy Groom, City Manager in Exeter. We appreciate the opportunity to provide this update, and following the presentation, which will be brief, I will facilitate any questions. So with that, Councilmember Reyes.
Thank you. I've had the opportunity to serve on the EDC board since 2014 after being appointed to the Porterville City Council, and there's been some significant accomplishments during that time. First off, in 2014, we were reaccredited by the International Economic Development Council. Now, this is just one of 42 nationally and one of 2 in California. In fact, the team that came said that we had earned the right to be named California's most innovative economic development organization. So that was a pretty nice accomplishment. And next, in 2015, we were deemed a certified digital economic development organization. Digital is not just a buzzword. That means our staff of 4 has been trained and certified in current techniques in their field, and it's one of the first in California. We've got California's only certified sites program. Now, in this day and age of regulation, it can be very valuable to have some sites that have been kind of looked through. They've been graded and identified. And when someone's looking to relocate, it can be quite valuable to have a site that's ready to develop. We've got California's only business incentive fund. This fund is targeted at manufacturers and high-capacity employers. For an example, Cali Cheese was able to utilize this fund to help with their economic impact report. And there's also about $40,000 out there right now for various projects within the county. We've also got a real estate portal that is up and running. This helps people who are looking to locate, find sites, not just sites details, but demographics on communities. Now, they can actually use this as a powerful tool to engage those communities directly, and actually, in a very short time, we'll be able to actually take the data that's been used to input from those site locators and be able to market directly to their needs. So we're looking forward to that.
One of the many successful and beneficial relationships that we're very proud of is the long-standing relationship that we have with Beacon Economics. The city has joined together to continue to support the 9-year relationship between the Tulare County EDC and Beacon Economics. And Chris Thornburg, their renowned economist who was one of the few who predicted the housing and financial crash that led to the recession. Some of you may recall he initially made that forecast here in Tulare County during his appearance at the EDC's annual Economic Summit, which is set this year for April 8th. We invite you to join us for another exciting economic forecast event. You can go on the EDC's website to obtain tickets to that event. The relationship with Beacon Economics provides monthly employment reports, a quarterly economic report that highlights trends in Tulare County, and annually they produce the Tulare County Economic Forecast, which predicts changes in employment, tax revenue, housing, construction, and other notable economic factors. The anticipated change in the minimum wage will have far-reaching implications both locally and statewide, and we've asked Chris to address the ramifications of this change in his upcoming address.
Good morning. So currently the EDC is working with 22 companies. A majority of these companies are manufacturers and food processors. These are well-paying head-of-household jobs with benefits. These projects combined represent nearly 5,000 potential jobs. Tulare County is on the final list of several of these projects, including sites within each of your districts and in some cases within your unincorporated jurisdictions. Now, we all know it's not the EDC that determines the location, but the company chooses the best location that fits their needs. Our job at the EDC is to provide them all the necessary information so that they do choose Tulare County. We recognize the win-win benefit to not only the community that lands the project, but the surrounding communities who will benefit from the jobs created. For example, in my community of Dinuba, 41% of our residents work within the city, while 23% come to Visalia for work. Project announcements within the past 2 years include Replanet, a recycling processor. That was 300 jobs. As you know, Sven Hartz relocated their manufacturing from Oakland to Exeter, creating 120 jobs. Crystal Golden acquired the former Lactalis cheese facility in Tipton, creating another 140 manufacturing jobs. And in Tulare next month, Universal Meditech will be opening their doors, creating 70 more jobs. The Economic Development Corporation's goal is to improve the quality of life one job at a time. And in over 600 local residents will experience that result due to the work of the EDC.
Good morning, Chairman Ennis and board members. I want to share the economic and fiscal impact that the announced projects will provide to our local economy, as well as to the coffers of the County of Tulare. The announced projects will provide an annual economic impact of $125.6 million. For the County of Tulare, you will see an addition of $434,000 in new revenue when the projects are in full operation. As Vice Mayor Harness noted, the EDC is working with a number of projects in which Tulare County locations are on the short list. One of those projects we refer to under the code name of Project Wilson, although I suspect that many of you will be able to figure out who that company is. This project at build-out will generate approximately 1,875 jobs and have an $831 million impact over the next 20 years. For the County of Tulare, if this project locates here, you will receive approximately $29.7 million in net revenue over 20 years. And I might add here a big thank you for the real property tax incentives offered by Tulare County to help attract Project Wilson to Visalia. The work of the EDC benefits everyone, local businesses and residents, local agencies such as schools and cities, and benefits the government of the County of Tulare as well.
So I want to thank my colleagues for joining me in providing this update. As Phil Jackson said, the strength of the team is each individual member, and the strength of each member is the team. We have an engaged board. We have a dedicated staff committed to growing jobs in Tulare County. And on behalf of my board, we invite you to rejoin us in those efforts. As Helen Keller has said, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. Thanks again for this opportunity to provide you an update, and I'll be happy to facilitate any questions you might have.
I just want to thank the EDC for coming today and making this presentation. It's always good to hear what the organization is doing, and I know that you are having an impact not only in the member cities, but in the whole county as well. And so we appreciate that effort and hope that someday, hopefully soon, we can rejoin you in those efforts as well. So, but keep up the great work, and I know that Mike Washam, on behalf of the Tulare County Economic Development team, is very active and willing to assist in any way that he can as well.
Okay. Thank you, Supervisor.
Okay, thank you, guys. And like I say, our economic development and yours can always work together into the future to make this place a better place for all of us.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you so much for the update. Okay, let's move to item number 4, public comment. Anybody wishing to speak to the board on issues that are not on the agenda today but are pertinent to Tulare County may speak at this time.
Thank you, Chairman, Supervisors. My name is Joel Rosales, and I'm here on behalf of veterans here in Tulare County and Visalia. I'm here to invite you guys to a Veteran 22-a-day Suicide and PTSD Awareness March that we will be having April 22nd. This is to basically raise awareness for PTSD, those who suffer with it, but not just the veteran themselves, but the family members, the wives, the moms, the dads, the children. It's an epidemic that a lot of veterans do have, and it impacts not just them itself, but the family members as well. We are going to be holding this event. It'll be starting at the Visalia Memorial Building and heading out to the Greatest Generation Memorial just down the street here, over by the Tulare County Office Building. So the reason for the event is basically to raise awareness. We would love to have you guys' support, love to have you guys there. There's a Facebook page going, there's something on Instagram, there's a lot of different things we're doing to try to raise awareness. Some of us will be going on the radio as well. It's a very emotional subject for me. I had a friend who passed away from suicide just months after returning from Iraq. It's something as veterans we hold dear. Seeing a buddy who passed away from suicide after surviving 2 tours in Iraq is never a good thing. Suicide as a whole on anybody is never a good thing, and we just ask for your guys' support and hope to see you guys there. I do have flyers that I will be handing here for you guys to look at. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that update. Anybody else wishing to speak under public comment?
Mr. Chair, we're going to introduce our new board member, our new board rep today. Have her introduce herself.
Yeah, come on up, Carrie. We got a new board member.
Board rep.
Board rep, right.
Good morning. Thank you, Board of Supervisors and everyone. My name is Carrie Crane, and I joined the team of board representatives last week, serving as your newest board rep and as well as public information officer. So look forward to seeing me taking pictures, and you'll see them on our social media sites here soon. And background on me, I am native of Southern California, grew up in the Chino area, specifically lived in Norco, California, and made my way to Visalia after college and have been here for 5 years and love Tulare County. It reminds me a lot of home, and looking forward to making it my new home and being here working for you many, many years. Thank you.
Thank you. He formerly was with the Tulare County Farm Bureau for 4 years, and their loss is our gain. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to consent calendar. We're going to pull item number 17 for separate consideration. Any other items that need to be pulled from the board?
Mr. Chair, I just thought it would be worth highlighting, we don't need to pull it for separate consideration, but highlighting item 37, which was the acceptance of $6.6 million of SB 1022 jail construction funds. I remember we had a planning session a while back where we talked about how we were going to be having to scale that project down because of us being stripped of some funding due to Stanislaus County being awarded more money. And here we are now receiving that allocation back because in Santa Barbara County they realized that $6.6 million would only build them probably an outhouse. So it's very nice that we are going to get that money and be able to build our project at Sequoia Field out to its full potential.
Okay. Well, we can do the most of the consent calendar. Make a motion on that, and then we'll move to item 17.
I'll make the motion that we approve the consent calendar less item 17, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Supervisor Vanderpool, second by Supervisor Cox. Cast your votes.
That was Supervisor Worthy.
Oh, Supervisor Worthy, pardon me. Don't let me take you out of the spotlight. And the vote is unanimous. Okay. On item number 17, I've got Derek Weishart that wants to speak to this issue.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, county council, and our administrator. I want to thank you for the time to listen to me today. I'll try to be brief. I am an attorney, so I'll do my best. The purpose for me being here today is so that I could fully understand the process for which item 17 reached the agenda and was presented by agreement for a vote today. It was my understanding that through the process of the committee that was put together, that there would be a full review of proposals for the conflict public defender, and that those proposals would be reviewed for viability and presented to the board as options or of what's a viable proposal. According to the agenda item, each proposal was deemed viable. And so at that point, my question is I see the paper yesterday, and the paper has anointed the winner without even the board vote yet. The matter is placed on the consent calendar as a routine item, but I would present to the board that this is not a routine item. This is a once-in-a-career, once-in-a-generation shifting of leadership in the conflict public defender program. We've had a changing of the guard, so to speak, in our county for the past several years. We have a new sheriff, Mike Boudreau. We have a new district attorney, Tim Ward. We have a new chief of police, Jason Salazar. We have a new public defender, Ms. Berlini. All of which are justice partners, several of which were references of mine in this program who I don't believe were even contacted through the vetting process. We were required to submit 5 references. I submitted 15 of community leaders, business leaders in our community, judges who have known me for 20 plus years. So I felt that this should not be a consent calendar item, but should be make sure that if the board had any questions, make sure that the board were presented with the viable options rather than a singular choice for approval on a consent calendar. My proposal, I've had a chance to review the agreement. My proposal fits precisely, almost exactly within the agreement. I was going to take the business model of the county, add new technology, new leadership as a certified specialist in criminal law, and add new ideas, new efficiencies. Anything that's worthy of a change is worthy of strong consideration by the board. So at this point, I just felt that this is not a $199,000 contract. It's a $199,000 per month contract. It's a $12 million contract, and this board is charged with picking a new leader to take this contract into the future. I believe the committee deemed this a viable option, and I believe that a full vetting and background should be done on all candidates. So with that, if the board has any questions, that's why I'm here today. I want to thank the board for the time. I want to thank County Council. I want to thank the County Administrative Office. I want to thank the Public Defender for their time in this effort. But at that point, if there's any questions, that's why I was here today, to make sure the board is fully informed of the options that were presented. Thank you.
Questions? I was going to have Debbie come up and speak to this.
Yeah, thank you.
Debbie, you want to come up and speak?
And while she's coming, Mr. Chairman, I guess one of the questions I would have is, in terms of timeliness, is this something that requires some immediate action, or could we bring this back to the board for a non-consent item as an untimed agenda item?
The existing contract expires March 31st. So there is some timeliness involved. There's a potential to extend if that's what the board wanted, but I can't guarantee that without speaking with the existing contractor. I'm glad that Mr. Weishart clarified. He has been, professional, responsive all throughout the process, and W. Vaughn County Administrative Office. Sorry about that. As were all the 3 proposals that we received. We did thoroughly examine each of the proposals. We had extensive conversations about it. That's being the panel, the public defender, a representative from County Council, and myself. We did contact some of the references for each of the proposals. So we had a pretty good idea of what's been going on. As you're aware, I've been having oversight of this contract for the last several years. So I'm pretty familiar with the process and how it works. The decision was made based on a number of factors that were reviewed with the county administrative officer. One was that the pricing that was offered was consistent with the pricing that we were paying now. Mr. Weishart's proposal was very similar to the contractor that's recommended. He was proposing 1 additional attorney for a slight increase in cost. We made the determination that additional attorney on a routine basis was not necessary, therefore the additional cost was not necessary. One of the other factors was that the existing contractor did agree to turn over his rights on his contract to the proposer that's being recommended. That has a cost savings to the county, because the way our current contract reads, if we discontinue services with our existing contractor, we have to negotiate payment for cases which those attorneys may not be released. So there was a transition benefit and a cost savings based on that situation. There were other factors that went into it as well. We feel that the court coverage is appropriate, given it would have been appropriate with Mr. Weishart. It's appropriate with the existing contractor. The other thing is the proposer that is being recommended has been working as the contingency contractor under the existing contract. What that means to the courts and to the county is that individual has a lot of experience in how the program is run. It is, as Mr. Weishart stated, it is a really important contract. There are 24 attorneys. They cover 11 criminal defense contract courts, 4 juvenile courts, and a number of specialty courts within the county. That's in Porterville, that's out at pretrial, that's at Visalia. If anything were to happen to that system, it could essentially shut down the court. So having someone who has some experience running the program was deemed to be very valuable and beneficial to the county as well. There was extensive conversations with the proposers about how they would monitor quality service, and the panel was also very comfortable that the recommended proposal would not only make sure that the system ran smoothly, but also that the clients that we are charged indirectly as the county of ensuring that they have quality representation would indeed receive that representation. So I'm happy to answer any additional contracts. I would like the resolution, if it is passed, to reflect the fact that the amount listed is a monthly amount.
Supervisor Cox.
A couple of questions. First, I don't see the name of a third firm. I guess there were three, correct? I don't know any of the three that applied, so questions in regards to that is, Ellen, are they local?
Yes.
They're of Visalia
Yes.
group? Okay, and a couple technical things. We talked about continuity. Wouldn't there be a natural transition period when you switch from one to another? Wouldn't the, say, the defendants that are having their conflict attorney, wouldn't they continue to follow that through an ending, or is it going to switch and where you'd end up with a brand new attorney because we're changing contractors?
That's a possibility. It's up to the court. The court, once an attorney is assigned, the attorneys can request that they be relinquished from the case. It is in our existing contract that that request would be made. However, the court makes the determination. It's very strong possibility that in the case of some of the capital cases or special circumstances cases that are currently pending, that the court would not release the attorneys because it wouldn't be deemed in the best interest of the client at that point. In those cases, the county would be obligated to continue to pay those attorneys in addition to paying the cost of a new contract.
A lot of times when we see professional contracts like this, there's a score sheet. We keep a score sheet because I don't see anything. All I really saw was the sentence that says each was considered as a viable candidate. So I don't see any scoring. I know you gave a little explanation, but I don't see any of that in the staff report.
There wasn't a numerical scoring system done. There was, and I'm happy to provide the board with that, we did prepare a spreadsheet where we evaluated the number of the critical factors, how many attorneys, cost, coverage proposals, transition proposals, case management system. Some of those things are qualitative, case management and the, as I referred to, the conversations that were had with each of the proposals about how they would ensure quality of service to the clients.
I think maybe that would have been helpful. So I guess I'm down to just two then. That you said something about a proposal to add an additional attorney. Would that be in addition to the additional attorneys that we probably funded with the Red Soul when we allocated another $250,000 and potentially more for the remainder of the year?
The proposal from Mr. Weishart was to have 25 attorneys instead of 24, which is what we have right now. What that would mean, for example, in the Red Soul case, there were 82 defendants in that case. So that would make, in that particular case, you would need one less outside attorney. That's the first time a case of that magnitude has hit. And we actually had two cases like that last year. We had the large marijuana grow in South County and the Red Soul case that necessitated the outside attorneys.
Since this is a contract for services, I'm trying to, why would it matter if they would have 25 instead of 24 or 28? Because we don't pay for, I wouldn't think we would pay for 28 attorneys on the contract. We would just pay for their time. So am I misunderstanding that we just don't pay for their time?
We contract out with a contractor, and that contractor in turn hires subcontractor attorneys. That agreement is between the contractor that we hire and the subcontractor attorneys. It's not an agreement between the county and the subcontractor attorneys. So the terms of their agreement between each other, the monthly amount that they're paid or not paid, is between them. What we get is a proposal for a total monthly price to provide 24 attorneys to cover those various departments that I mentioned earlier throughout the county.
Okay, that was it for me.
Mr. Chair, I just had a quick question just about process. You know, we award contracts on a regular basis at the board, and I'm pretty sure the process is fairly consistent in that we basically release a request for proposals. The proposals are submitted. Those are scored by a committee, and then the results are then presented to the board, who ultimately make the award of the contract, not a vetting of all proposals received here at the Board of Supervisors. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's normally a panel of some sort within the county. For example, when we did the inmate medical health contract a few years back, that was done by...
I just want to make sure that process is conveyed to the applicants who are submitting proposals, making sure they have a full understanding of that when they submit. Thanks.
I think that I'm a little surprised that we had this just as a consent calendar item, given the magnitude of the contract and the fact that it is something which we do not do. We have a lot of contracts that just sort of naturally continue on and on and on, but this one is a little bit different in that normally, as was stated, that the current contractors had this position for many, many years, and so one would anticipate that once this gets underway and if it's successful, it would continue on like that way. So I think in light of and I appreciate the presentation, and I think if we'd had we just basically took a consent item and had an untimed item. And this would be the very same kind of a representation or presentation that would have been given to the board. Perhaps we'd have had, as Mr. Cox indicated, the scoring sheet or something in front of us. But this is pretty typical of how we would have handled the situation, brought it back to the board. Board would have had a discussion, would have voted. About 99% of the time, we generally will go with the representations made by the panel that was there doing the interviewing. I guess, and in light of the time frame, I think we need to take action on this today because we have a contract that's expiring prior to having another meeting. What I would suggest that we might look at doing is bringing this back in a year's time for review just to see how successfully things are going. Because, again, normally we do these things and they just sort of go on and on and on and on, but given the fact this is a major change going from one existing contractor who we've had for many, many years to a new contract, it might be well for us to go back and look at this in a year's time to see, is that a good choice? Are things working out well? Do we have any problems? Because I think this is a major issue, and I think it really should have been an untimed item, but I will say again, we basically have handled it as an untimed item because by taking out the consent calendar and having this conversation, that's what we would normally do in an untimed item. So,
Mr. Chairman, may I make a point of clarification? Thank you. As to the budget that this would require, the monthly budget in the agreement that's proposed today is $199,000 per month for 24 lawyers. My proposal was $198,000 per month for 25 lawyers. My proposal included very clearly that I've discussed with the vast majority of the current local attorneys that they would stay on board. There's not going to be a mass change of workforce. There's going to be a smooth transition by design. Ms. Vaughn mentioned that my proposal is very similar to what the county's used to in terms of the contract. That was on purpose for a smooth transition to the courts. There will be no major interruption in the court system if we don't stay with the current contractor and his successor. Similarly, the transition point, I know we're at the 11th hour here, but I would also state that the current contractors aren't even on a subcontractor right now. They're being paid, in the normal course of business without the actual subcontract that's required. And so, even if this is postponed 3 weeks or another month, my corporation is set up ready to go. The bank accounts are ready. I have the custom software to improve efficiencies that is internal. It's not anything the county has to deal with, to improve reporting, statistical continuity, and forms of reporting from these contractors so that we can get better statistics on the cases that are being handled. And so, as a cost matter, when I look at the agreement before the board, it would appear that my proposal is actually $1,000 a month less for an additional attorney. And it's going to be largely the same attorneys. I have access to death-qualified attorneys if anybody wants to retire or anything like that. So the urgency, I wish it wasn't such an urgent matter in that view, but I truly want to submit that the Board of Supervisors ought to have a chance to review at least the proposals or have discussion on it rather than this is just, punted for another year because we're at the 11th hour. So with due respect, that would be my request, is that this matter come back in a month or something. And so the board has a chance to at least review the proposals, and again, that way it's fully vetted, it's fully informed by the board to make an informed vote.
I need to make a point of clarification. The contract actually for the first year is for $195,292.47 per month. So under the recommendation that you're suggesting, the contract price is actually lower. And I appreciate Mr. Weishart's desire to have the contract. I completely understand. As I said, he's been professional and courteous throughout the process. I've outlined the reasons that staff and the panel, and I do want to say that the panel was selected because they had extensive experience. The public defender sat on the panel. There was a member from council who, in addition to being an attorney for council right now, also worked for several years as a public defender. There was extensive conversations with the courts in terms of their desires of the process. They're the ones who are greatly impacted in addition to the county. So there was a great deal of care and consideration taken to the magnitude of the contract, the potential consequences, and the parties selected to evaluate those proposals were chosen based on those factors.
I would say I couldn't see any reason why we can't proceed here. Council, do you have any objection if we proceed with this?
No objection, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, I'll bring it back.
It would have been very helpful for me to have the scoring sheet, and that would have given me a little more backup to move forward this quickly. So that's my only contention. It would have been helpful.
My only comment, Mr. Chairman, would be that I don't disagree with what Mr. Cox is saying, but we've been given the substance of what that was, and the committee met. They have made their recommendation, and I'm confident we should go forward today with the recommendation. I do think we should bring this back in a year's time and see if it's working well, and so we don't just make sure it's just for like an automatic kind of thing, because that's kind of been the history in this particular area. So I would move to approve the agenda item and note that these are monthly fees, not annual costs.
The agreement proposed is a 3-year agreement, though.
Understood. We can still bring it back for a review. Doesn't stop us from looking at it and see how things are going.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Worthley.
I'll second the motion.
Second by Supervisor Vanderpool. Cast your votes. Vote is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, let's go to our first public hearing. Item number 5, request from Resource Management Agency to consider a vacation of a portion of excess right-of-way, 240.
Good morning. My name is Reed Shanky with Resource Management Agency. The matter before you here today is a vacation of excess right-of-way of a portion of Road 240. This is another one of our so-called paper roads. Quickly go over a little bit of the process, give you some background and photos on the location that we're talking about here, be available for questions, and then ask you to open a public hearing as part of the required process. The petition, or the proposed vacation, was initiated by petition by the property owners adjacent to the roadway, the Cole Ranch. We're talking about an excess right-of-way of Road 240, which is an alignment. It's not a current road. It's between Avenue 100 and Avenue 102, which is another paper road. It's 25 feet in width and a little over 1,200 length, so about 3/4 of an acre in size. Currently not a county-maintained road. Access would not be affected due to this vacation. There are power lines on the road, as you'll see in a couple pictures here later, and the easements for those utilities would be maintained. And as evidenced by the petition we received, with about 20 signatures of local property owners nearby, we believe that neighbors do support the vacation of the roadway. Notices have been posted in the newspaper, and we've mailed to local residents, and as of today, we have not received any comments in opposition to the vacation. The location here is just to the north of Terabella. On the right side, you can see it's a bit blurry, but it's between Avenue 100, which is a current road, and Avenue 102, which is a roadway easement. I think aerial photos tell the story a little bit better, but here's the Terabella, just to the north. The green lines are existing roadways, arterials, collectors. You can see State Route 65 there on the west side. And then this is the proposed vacation section right here. Zooming in a little bit, the Avenue 100. Again, it's about 1,200 feet in length, 25 feet in width. Normally our roads are about 60 feet in width. We only have a 25-foot wide easement here. It was established in 1913 as part of the Norwood Rancho subdivision. You can see the development on the east side, and then the west side is vacant or being used for agricultural purposes. And the property owner, I believe, is the same on both sides of the roadway here. Some photos. This is standing on Avenue 100 looking east, so this is the roadway that would be maintained. The proposed vacation would be the intersection off to the left here. Standing at the intersection looking north, it's basically the driveway for the property. You can see the power poles there and then the line of trees. 25-foot width on the right-hand side of the fence. Moving further north, standing about 2/3 of the way up the alignment, no access through there and get the trailer and whatnot parked in between. Coming around to the north side and looking to the south, you can see the bluff there in the distance, so that's pretty much where that proposed roadway would end. The property in the foreground is really not what we're talking about. We're south of that location there. So what staff has found is that pursuant to Streets and Highway Code Section 8324B, we believe that the current right-of-way is unnecessary for present or prospective uses. There's no net county cost to the general fund. To this vacation, there'd be no cost to the road fund. We've performed a general plan review, and this vacation is consistent with plans and policies of the County of Tulare. We don't plan to road anytime soon in the near future, next 30, 35 years at least, through here. And we've prepared an environmental notice of exemption pursuant to CEQA Act. So the request would be that you conduct the public hearing, determine that the vacation is exempt pursuant to CEQA, determine the right-of-way is unnecessary for present or prospective use, and the vacation is in the public interest, approve the resolution as shown in your package, and then we've got a legal description of the property that would be vacated there, and then direct the clerk of the board to record the document. That, I'm available to answer any questions, and then I would ask that you conduct the public hearing, and I believe there may be someone from the requester here as well to speak to the issue.
I haven't got a question, but it's real familiar to me because the horse ranch on the right, Andy Williams bought that early on in the late 50s and 60s, and that was his horse ranch that he developed there in Terabella. So, yes. Mr. Tharp.
Good morning. Michael Tharp with R.L. Schaefer and Associates. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, staff. I'm here with Mr. Cole Horse Ranch, and we're available for questions, if any.
Any questions? No? Well, let's open up for public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak to this may do so at this time. Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing, bring it back to the board.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Moved by Supervisor Wordley, second by Supervisor Rashida. Vote is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, let's go to item number 6.
Good morning, Chairman. Mike Washam, RMA. No PowerPoint on this. It's pretty straightforward. This is the ordinance amending Chapter 23 of Ordinance Code. Under the current ordinance code pertaining to administrative fines, an appeal before an administrative hearing officer is automatically set for every notice of violation. And then the director of the enforcing agency or administrating agency department has to have a hearing. requires the preparation of staff report and compiling the administrative record, and oftentimes the people never come. So it's in effect of having a more efficient strategy. We would like to have a simple change revised to have the violation actually appeal, request in a hearing rather than an automatic appeal set. And this is consistent with the surrounding jurisdictions, Kings, Kern, Fresno, Madera, that they all have to require request an appeal hearing. So with that, that's really all this is.
Chairman, I have a question. I fully agree with the concept, and the only thing I would ask would be that in the process of somebody be given a notice of violation, that there would be kind of some bold text and not in some tiny font size that advises people that they have the opportunity to appeal, that they are given notice of that in writing, so that when they get this, if they feel like they've been wronged somehow, they know fairly clearly what the path is to seek an appeal of a decision by an administrative decision.
Absolutely, and that will be done, and on those letters are reviewed by county council as we go forward on that, and those disclosures will be made in the letters.
Supervisor Vanderpool.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the exact same thing, that we make sure that we inform people of the right to appeal, and we do so in a bilingual fashion as well.
Chair, I don't remember reading. What percentage of people have actually shown up to these? I know that's been a problem for a long time. You have a hearing officer, staff, and nobody shows.
I would say less than 10% of the people show up.
Okay, thank you.
So this is a request for public hearing and then action.
Okay, we'll open the public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak to this issue may do so at this time. Seeing no one, close the public hearing and bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chair, motion to approve.
Moved by Supervisor Cox.
I'll second the motion.
Second by Supervisor Vanderpool. Vote unanimous. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item number 7. Tulare County's annual general plan housing element progress report. Mr. Washam.
Thank you. Again, Mike Washam, Tulare County RMA. What we have before you today is the annual general plan and housing element progress reports. Government code requires that on an annual basis that the status of general plan progress and of its implementation is presented to you, our Board of Supervisors, as well as the Governor's Office of Planning and Research and HCD. And as part of the general plan report, there's also the annual housing element report is also required to be submitted. The general plan update, I won't belabor these issues. These have been reviewed often by your board over the past few months. But as part of the stipulated agreement for the settlement, the accomplishments are listed here, with everyone being accomplished, and with the exception of the Ag Conservation Easement Program, which we're in the process of working with now. General plan accomplishments, again, the community plans. We adopted 6 community plan updates this past year, and these plans included comprehensive rezoning of the communities as well as complete street program plans. These are some of the major development applications that were processed in 2015. This by no means is a full list. This is just a very top of the waves type of listing of some of the major projects that we've done this past year. These are public works projects that were completed in the past year. Again, these are very important to our communities. There's been some reports given to your board on these matters as well just recently, so I won't go into detail on these. The housing element was adopted in November by your board, certified by HCD just a couple weeks later in December. This also included the adoption of the SB 244 disadvantaged communities, which required a review of land use element that included water, wastewater, stormwater drainage, and emergency service protection needs for deficiencies for each of the identified communities. We added some language to the land use element to encourage and promote extension and construction of upgrading of public water, sewer, systems to those communities. We also adopted Housing Element Action Program 9, which basically aligned with what SB 244 was, but actually even in a greater detail, including and encompassing many more communities than just what was required out of SB 244. Zoning ordinance, there was 8 amendments to the zoning ordinance regarding the housing element that were requirements from the previous housing element that were implemented this past year in 2015 as well. And here's a basic data of new home constructions in the unincorporated areas. We've got a total net gain in 2015 of 175 units when you count those new constructions and those demolitions. So with that, request that the board holds a public hearing, available for questions, and then submit the report, authorize transmittal of these reports to the state.
I'm surprised to see the number of demolished housing units.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a fourth. Amazing.
Mr. Chair, I would just make the clarification just so people know that this is in the unincorporated area of the county, not necessarily inclusive of what happens in the incorporated areas of cities.
Well, I think the proactive approach that RMA has had to rezone all these small communities out here, so when industry or businesses come along and want to locate there, they can go right in and get things going. So I think it's very good. Okay, let's open the public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak to this issue may do so at this time. Seeing none, close the public hearing, bring it back to the board.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Supervisor Berkeley, second by Supervisor Ishida. Cast your votes.
Sorry, I hit the wrong one.
Mr. Worsley,
there we go.
okay, thank you.
Thinks he has
Voted
2
unanimous.
votes
Thank
today.
You. Trying to pitch a curve, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll move on to item number 40. That's our items not timed. Request from the Board of Supervisors staff to receive input, provide direction regarding the federal legislative priorities of going to Washington, D.C.
Good morning, Board. Julieta Martinez, Board Representative, and good morning, CAO County Council. I don't have a PowerPoint for you today. I will try to keep this very brief, as I know we have more items ahead of us. But in your agenda item was included 2 exhibits. One was our last year's priorities for the annual advocacy trip, and this year is a draft of priority issues. Today, I'm just seeking input, direction, any changes you may have. None of this is set in stone. It is for your review. And none of these are in order of priority. However, if you'd like to prioritize the list at the end, we may do so. So I will go one by one, but please feel free to stop me if you have any questions or comments, or we can leave those for the end. Just a quick recap. The first 3 items on this list we have done in years past. We'll start with payment in lieu of taxes. They are federal payments to local governments that help offset losses in property taxes due to non-taxable federal lands within their boundaries. We do have 36 counties that currently have lands acquired by the Department of Fish and Wildlife for wildlife management areas. The government has proposed a payment of $644,000 in the 2016-17 budget. We also had payments last year. However, it is unclear if future administration may choose to fund it or not. Recently, we had received requests from the Rural County Representative of California, RCRC, which is a group this board is part of, to send a letter of support for changes in PILT legislation, as there was a recent change. SB 83, the 2015 Public Resources Budget Trailer Bill, changed some language in the Fish and Game Code section to make the payments permissive. Other words, instead of it being shall to may, it's making them an option. RCRC has requested Valley counties to support them in making these mandatory. So we keep the request at reauthorization of payments in full funding. SCAP, State Criminal Alien Assistant Program. We've also done this in years past. It is the Bureau of Justice Assistance, U.S. Department of Justice administers the State Criminal Alien Assistance Program in conjunction with the Bureau of Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Citizenship and Immigration Services, Department of Homeland Security, a lot of long titles. The federal government is ultimately responsible for immigration enforcement, including the incarceration of undocumented criminal offenders. When that's not possible, the law requires the federal government to compensate state and local governments for their incarceration costs. Although SCAP appropriations have decreased dramatically in recent years, the costs incurred by local law enforcement have increased significantly, so this mostly affects our sheriff. We received about $520,000 in 2015, which is approximately 4% of the actual cost insured. So we are not really getting our money's worth for everything spent on these incarcerated people. So we will request full funding for SCAP.
Mr. Chair. Before she goes beyond that, this represents a significant decline in years past. I mean, we used to get significantly more money for this. But just to clarify one thing. This is the sheriff's portion of it. We have a lot more expense engaged with the illegal alien criminal activity in Tulare County, because this is sort of the gatekeeper, if you will. After an arrest and incarceration, we have prosecution, defense, probation staff. So the reason for this push, and we need to continue to make it, is that this represents 13% of the sheriff's costs. It probably represents 2% of our total county costs in terms of these are the hidden costs of not having a secure border. Because as people come across illegally and then they engage in criminal activity, I'm not saying everybody does, but when they do, there are costs to local government, and this is a huge cost to our county. So I just want to say that I just want to clarify that when you made some comment about the county's cost. This is only the sheriff's cost. We have a lot of additional costs that factor into this as well.
Chairman, Supervisor Worthley brings up a good point, and I would look to have figures from our district attorney and our probation and from our public defender to where we can add those comments in when we talk about the reimbursement for jails.
I think Tim would like to say.
Also, while he's coming up, I'm just doing some quick math. That means we're spending over $12 million of general fund money. I think we need to see that in a visual. I know we've been very proactive about taking visuals. We need to have it, whether it be a graph, your reimbursement, compared to our costs. I think that provides a very affirmative statement that this is how much you're covering, this is how much we're paying. So I would, it's reading it 4%, that looks like, wow, that's a lot of money. But when you multiply that into the $500,000 that they're providing, we're looking at least a $12 million shortfall. It's amazing.
Tim, would you like to say something?
Just a quick comment. I'm listening. I do understand the board's position on this, and I just want to comment. I don't know that we, as the district attorney's office, would be able to provide any input statistically. This is not any type of data field that we track. When we decide to file or not to file charges or prosecute an individual, in no way do consideration their immigration status. It's not something that we consider. It's not something that we statistically track. I will say, however, anecdotally, I think I agree with you. I agree with you because in the last couple of years, our involvement in U-Visa requirements and requests, U-Visa is victims of crime that have immigration issues that wish to make sure that during the time that they've reported and are cooperating with law enforcement, they cannot be deported, that their immigration status in no way can be used against them. We've seen an enormous increase in visa applications. That data I can give you, and so we can extrapolate the victim population, perhaps equate. But I just want to be clear, that's not something that we track in the prosecution.
Tim, if I might, Mr. Chairman, my point here would be, let's start doing that, because I remember when they first started the SCAP program, one of the reasons why we were able to get substantial funding was because we were tracking it at the sheriff's office. And so when there was suddenly funding made available, we had the statistical information to provide. I remember Fresno County did not, and they did not get any funding initially because of that. So not to say that we're going to find more money from the federal government, but I think it makes a stronger argument for full funding of the SCAP program. But also, in the event that we can expand this to recognize, hey, listen, federal government, this is really your problem, your failure to do your job that has an impact on local government. And so we should be, in my mind, we should be doing that at your level, public defender's office, probation department, so that we have the information so that in the event that in the future there is legislation an appropriation which will allow for funding, we would be in a position to receive that, because without that data, it isn't going to happen.
I agree with you. From the county standpoint, cases that come from TCSO may have that. I guess I can start a dialogue with the city agencies, but at this point we would be obligated to report what's given to us. Once we file charges, as the public defender would know, we're not in the position to ask for that information anymore. But it's certainly something that we can dialogue and talk at the police chief's level. So thank you.
Certainly good to have those facts and figures when we go back, be able to leave with folks and let them look at it. So, I mean, that's very important. That's something we do want to make sure gets on there. Thank you.
Okay, next item. I'm sorry, any more comments?
Oh, you're good.
Next item, Secure Rural Schools and Community Self-Determination Act. This is actually administered by the U.S. Forest Service. Also something we've had on the platform annually. It allows the USDA to work directly with community leaders to meet rural communities' unique education, transportation, and conservation needs. It was actually reauthorized for 2 years, April 16 of last year. So in total, $285 million in Forest Service authorized funding will benefit 41 states here and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. We did receive funding in Titles 1, 2, and 3. They have split 3 titles last year, but we do want continued support and funding for this program beyond the 2017 deadline. The next one on your list is the Lake Success Enlargement Project. We actually recently received an update on it. As you know, last year it was moved from DSAC 2 to DSAC 3, which is a positive move and could possibly move to DSAC 4 status. The Army Corps of Engineers has actually continued to working on parts of the project related to dam safety. The main focus of the safety issue is the widening of the spillway to accommodate for a revised flood route. This dam safety function would also serve as part of the enlargement project. The project is still working through the dam safety phase, with some activities being connected to the enlargement. The idea is that the completion of the dam safety will provide the opportunity for a clear path to the enlargement project. So the Corps, the thought is they're moving at a great pace right now, and we want to support the Army Corps of Engineers in moving forward with this project. Although they do need to begin programming money in their budget for these type of enlargement projects, there isn't anything in the current budget or drafted in 2017. So the thought is that we would support for funding at the earliest would be fiscal year 18, but just continue to support the enlargement project as it keeps moving forward.
Through our efforts and through the irrigation district's efforts, that we got Lake Success brought back to capacity. So now we need to push forward to get this overtopping issue taken care of so that we can enlarge the pool. I think it's very important that we keep that.
I think it's pretty crazy that we're talking about them moving at a fast pace when we started this in 2003. Thought I'd point that out.
Oh, yeah, we started a little bit before.
No problem. The next 3 items are all related to transportation. They were actually submitted from our Tulare County Association of Governments. They had recently done their annual advocacy trip in February. These were the top 3 that they forwarded that they would like to highlight if the board wishes to continue support and advocating for. Good Movements is the first project. Congress approved a new highway transportation bill that included a new national highway freight program, and California is set to receive $582 million TCAG. Along with the county has been advocating for the San Joaquin Valley to receive a portion of this funding. They already have projects in place like the South Route 99 widening project that is actually construction ready. So we're just looking for support to get some of that funding to the Central Valley. The Regional Transportation Plan, it's a 25-year blueprint for transportation projects and funding in a region. It involves a lot of years of modeling, planning, and public outreach, and is required of all these agencies to update every 4 years. Their concern is that by the time they finish all the stakeholder outreach and updating, it's time for a new plan. So their goal is to get this extended to maybe 8 years or more. And then finally, farm to market routes. Dairy industry plays a major role in the economy of Tulare County and provides at least 5% of all milk consumed in the United States. All of this milk being transported to processing facilities by trucks over county roads. Caltrans has actually done a study, looked at it, and says that a fully loaded dairy truck can weigh up to 80,000 pounds. So roadways carrying 500 trucks per day would be impacted the same as if 5 million passenger cars had traveled the same road. TCAG has developed a farm-to-market strategy for prioritization that can be duplicated or used as a basis for the new program. Their suggestions would be advocating for special funding for our rural roads that are used by dairies for daily farm-to-market shipping through a set-aside in the next transportation or farm bill. I think you can even expand this. We are a big ag county, and besides dairies, there's other companies that we have that are just using trucks on the roads every day, and county roads are damaged not only by our passengers, but these trucks. So just advocating for funding in general for our roads. The next item on the agenda is Temperance Flat. So earlier this year, the San Joaquin Valley Water Infrastructure Authority was established under a joint exercise of powers agreements adopted by the counties of Merced, Madera, Fresno, Kings, and Tulare. This came in response to severe water supply reductions experienced in many parts of the San Joaquin Valley since 2012. The authority was formed to seek, promote, arrange, and compete for grants and other fundings for water infrastructure projects benefiting San Joaquin Valley constituents. These projects include, but are not limited to, the proposed Temperance Flat Dam on the San Joaquin River and other local surface and groundwater storage projects. These projects would be designed to improve water supply availability and reliability for the San Joaquin Valley's steadily growing population and business community, as well as the agriculture industry. Temperance Flat would be one of the main components, is a proposed dam on the San Joaquin River. The main purpose would be to supplement storage capacity in the upper San Joaquin River basin. The goal is that it would help to more than double water storage on the river. We've had support from AB 1586 Mathis Asequa exemption, trying to help us move forward with this. The authority is set to do some advocacy in Sacramento. They recently sent support letters to Senator Feinstein for long and short-term provisions to cope with drought. This bill could potentially authorize $600 million for water storage projects, and that would greatly benefit the current water storage development efforts. Even though it's labeled Temperance Flat, in regards to comments made by supervisors, it is a comprehensive plan. It's just one piece of the puzzle that would help address future drought and just address future water needs that are greatly needed in this valley. So some of the requests would be congressional construction authorization for Temperance Flat, potential funding, not only for construction, but the application process. It is very extensive. It will require a lot of funding, and it will require partnerships with federal and non-federal organizations, maybe private entities and irrigation districts. So it is a collaborative effort that began last year. It's just the beginning. There's a lot of work to do, and so we want to lobby for that as well. Next item on here, tree mortality. So it is no surprise California is facing a tree mortality crisis, and it was predicted that an estimated 29 million trees have already died and more are likely to die due to wildfire, drought, disease, and climate change. Governor Brown did declare an emergency proclamation October 2015 on the tree mortality epidemic and requested federal support and partnership. The budget doesn't contain specific proposals to address the mortality issue, but it does include $140 million for the department to support landscape scale forest health and resilience programs that reduce greenhouse gas emissions through fuel reduction, reforestation, pest and disease tree removal, and long-term protection of forest lands. We are seeking support and possible funding appropriations to augment these ongoing efforts, as we do have the sequoia forest in our backyard. Other counties have the Sierras. We do have a lot of trees that's on federal land, so the state is stepping up, but we ask that the federal government partner as well. They created a state task force, which one of our supervisors actually currently sits on. We are working with CAL FIRE, Public Utility Commissions, Caltrans, and other county agencies to form a local task force to also address those issues. CEO staff has been working on stats to try to identify kind of costs incurred by the county, costs incurred by other utility districts, costs incurred by the forest with all these dead removal of trees. So it is something we're just beginning, we're working forward to, and I don't know if you have any more comments.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, if I might, real quickly. I know that on April 1st, the Forest Service is going to be flying again to do another evaluation of the dead trees. It would be great if we could get that information before we get back, if it's possible, before we go back to Washington, D.C. If anybody's been into the forest in any recent time at all, they'll know how bad the situation is. It's just terrific. And we're going to get to the point later on talking about prioritization, but in my mind, this should be one of our top priorities. While we were in Washington last year, we found out about a 3,000 acre categorical exemption, which allowed the Forest Service to proceed with taking action on parcels of property of 3,000 acres in magnitude or smaller, and there was no limit to how many of these you could have, but it required a designation by the governor's office. So then we shifted our focus back to Sacramento to get that done by the governor. It took him several months to do that, and it took us a few months to find out if we were actually within a designated area for some reason. I don't know why it was so difficult. But so now it kind of shifts back to the Forest Service because these are lands under their jurisdiction. These are dead and dying timber on the national forest and the national monument, which is designed to protect and perpetuate giant sequoia groves. And so many of these dead trees are around groves, and so they need to be addressed, and we need to find out what are the funding sources that might be available to be used in this regard. Because even though the categorical exemption will reduce the overall cost of administering these programs, there are costs, and that we know that's a major problem at the Forest Service level. So this is in my mind, this should be a very high priority item, and if we can leverage state funding with federal funding and our own local contributions at 25% on the state portion of it, our goal would be hopefully to using a term of the Forest Service, increase scope and scale, and I mean that not in just a term of art, but actually in reality. So
we can probably get that information on that flight, because I was just talking to Kevin Elliott, Porterville, and he's going to be in on that. So hopefully we can get an update on what they're seeing out there. And of course, they already are moving into areas like Camp Nelson,
right,
and some of these private areas, and thinning trees out right now. So we'll try to get that information before we leave. But that should be one of our top priorities.
Watershed is a big issue too.
Mr. Chairman, my personal top priorities would be Temperance Flat, tree mortality, success, lake success, and
drinking water.
Well,
didn't gotten to drinking water yet.
Oh, and I was going to add one more. Thank you, Supervisor. One more subject that wasn't in the item, but we did want to re-include, and we included it last year, was also marijuana.
Before we go to that next item, just a quick comment on the tree mortality. It's great to hear there's apparently $145 million pocket somewhere to address the issue. My question is, what's the magnitude? Does that cover 50%, 5%, 1%, 0.001%? So I think the better educated we go, the better we're going to do. And then of that, how much of that, I know Supervisor Ennis loves that, we have $145 million. How many millions do we have to spend on paper killing trees to create a plan before we can actually go clear things out and
Well,
start
I can
fixing
respond to that real
things.
quickly. We're in the process of creating our task force. We have to come up with a plan. And this is, again, is limited. These are on state responsibility areas. So this is separate and apart from Forest Service lands. There is a 25% match requirement, and as of right now, these funds are only available for public lands. So if we have trees that are in danger of falling on our public streets, public campgrounds, whatever we can access with an approved plan, we will be able to access these funds. We have a 25% match, so every dollar we receive from them is going to cost us, or 75 cents, whatever it costs us a quarter. So we're going to have to be cautious about how we go forward with this program. But if, in my mind, if we have trees that are going to fall on our roads and the state will pay for 3/4 of it, that's a good deal because we need to get it done anyway. But it is a limited pot of money, and to your point of what is that going to take care of, a very small percentage of the trees, because it does not apply to any trees that are not in that category of affecting public assets. So all the private property owners, except to the extent that they have private land that adjoins streets, we can work with them to accommodate some of that. But other than that, private lands are not covered by it. The Forest Service is not covered by it, except that my understanding is that with like Caltrans, when you have a state highway running through a Forest Service or national park, they will be able to access these funds, and then I guess the 25% would fall to the agency, I suppose, not because certainly not us. But to your point of the problem is of such a magnitude, anything that we will do is only going to be very small percentages of that total. It's just going to take a combination of everything possible to be strategic and try to actually do something meaningful.
To expand on what Supervisor Cox and Supervisor Worthy spoke of, they were charging up to $1,200 a tree to cut down up in the Bass Lake area. Because just like well drillers, we don't have enough people that know how to use a chainsaw to cut these trees. So if you take 25% of that, that's $400 a tree, and money goes really fast at $400 a tree as our cost.
Okay, so one more item that wasn't listed in the agenda, but after a brief discussion, we wanted to add back on with your permission was marijuana eradication. The state of California has been going through the legalization process. However, that doesn't mean that illegal grows are going to go away from one day to the next. It's still a problem we are dealing with in this county and other counties. The biggest part of it being our sheriff in collaboration with Code Enforcement Council and other entities to do this eradication on private and public lands. So we always like to add it back in that we do seek federal support for cost recovery. Like stated before, it's not only the sheriff incurring costs, but it's also the county incurring costs to go into sometimes working with the Forest Service up in our national forest to remove marijuana. It ties us back into active forest management, so we do need to continue partnerships with them to continue this problem that is not likely to go away anytime soon.
And I think we still have the issue we've been trying to deal with for eons, it seems like, which is the overtime issue. We can only use these dollars for overtime, and then we can't use all of the money because we only have so many people dedicated to this process, and we've been trying for years to get relief from that administrative process. If we could just hire another person part-time to use up the funds, there's plenty of work to be done to justify the expenditure. But that's been an ongoing issue, and I'm sure it'll continue to be so.
Plus the fact we've had kind of a wet year, and we did have some snowfall in the mountains. There will be water up there for these guys to grow this marijuana this year, so it's going to be a big problem this coming year in our mountain areas with the fact that they can grow it.
Mr. Chair, I'll just ask Julieta to make sure that we can document any costs that go beyond the Sheriff's Department. I know the Sheriff's Department's really good about documenting their specific costs, but if we're going to cover code enforcement as well as county council, let's just make sure we go back with real numbers that we can seek reimbursement for.
I want to go back to Temperance Flat. I think we need a statement in there that without additional surface water allocations, we will not be able to supply our disadvantaged communities clean drinking water. And I think that's an important component to Temperance Flat.
And we sometimes forget that Tulare County is the primary beneficiary. I mean, Temperance Flat, you think, well, that's Fresno County, that's the San Joaquin River. What's that got to do with Tulare County? Well, the Friant Canal, most of it flows through Tulare County, and we are the primary beneficiaries of that existing project. And as Mr. Ishida knows, the last 2 years with zero allocations, it's had a huge impact on our farmers, upon our groundwater supply, upon our subsidence problems. And so it's very critical that we have a reliable, affordable supply of water. This project can help us to get there. And I think the disadvantaged community aspect of it is very critical. Orange Cove, which is in Fresno County, but right on the borders of Tulare County, relies upon that water for their drinking water. But we also have the city of Lindsay, Strathmore, community of Terabella, who also rely upon this water for domestic purposes. And so it is a very critical component to providing, as Supervisor Ishida said, affordable, clean drinking water to our people.
You know, looking at also the SCAP, I hadn't seen this figure, or don't remember the figure of 4% reimbursement rate. I really think the reason they never raised the reimbursement rate is the fact that the federal government doesn't want the public to understand how expensive this undocumented worker incarceration in criminal part really costs, because they always say that the tax earnings, taxable earnings of these undocumented workers are way and above what the costs are. But when you look at 4%, I think they're afraid nationally to look at the 100% figure. And I think we should ask them directly, is that the problem with SCAP? Are you unwilling to really show the real cost of what undocumented workers are costing us on law enforcement?
So just to recap and just make sure I have it correct, Supervisor Ishida, going back to your comments, and Supervisor Worthley, if you had to prioritize, we want to make sure we cover tree mortality, Temperance Flat, and Success Lake.
Success.
But I just want to be clear. I don't think that that could be a prioritization to make sure that those topics are covered. But I think it's important. All of the topics that you discussed are have a huge impact on Tulare County, and so I think we go back with information and handouts for each of the subjects, maybe with prioritization of those particular subjects. If someone were to ask, "What are your top 3 issues?" can cover those. But I do think it's very important that we have information about all that.
Well, I think what Supervisor Vanderpool brings up is a matter of who we get to see back there, and we need to have the information, the flyers, to where our lobbyists back there, if you schedule those meetings, we can schedule those meetings on those topics.
Just to respond to what Mr. Vanderpool said, I certainly agree with what he said. But I know in those times when we've been in Senator Feinstein's office, I mean, that's the first words out of her mouth. What's your top priority? Or what's your top 3 priority? And so it's good to go in there with a plan. So we say, here's our top priorities, boom, put it out there. And we always leave them with all the information, all the issues, her staff people. But that's responding really to a direct question, which sometimes comes to us when we're back there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that update.
Good job, Julieta. First time. You seem very knowledgeable. Great job.
Okay, thank you. Now let's move on to item number 41, mid-year budget. Roll over. Mr. Spada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen. It is both a privilege and a pleasure to present to you today County of Tulare mid-year budget report for fiscal year 2015-2016. May I begin by saying that the mid-year budget process is an opportunity to review the financial condition of Tulare County's various funds. It's also an opportunity to evaluate the economic or fiscal outlook for the coming year so that we can engage in a very prudent budget process as we move forward. Having said that, let me say that Tulare County's financial condition, I'm happy to report, is very strong. We have reserves of $25 billion. After revenues and expenditures for this fiscal year, we have a fund balance of $29 million. All in all, the financial condition led by your board, exercising prudent fiscal management, has done outstandingly well in ensuring that the fiscal condition, which translates into delivering essential public services to the residents of Tulare County, is sound. In terms of the report that I will be providing to you today, we have an outline up there of the major topics. The first one is a general economic outlook. The second one is the state budget for fiscal year 2016-17. Then there is a proposed budget protocol plan, which is consistent with the plan that your board has followed for many years. It builds on the strength of prior years as we head into the future. Next, there will be a complete mid-year budget report for fiscal year 15-16, the fiscal year in which we are right now. There will be a report with regard to the budget schedule, strategic management, fiscal sustainability, very importantly, the acknowledgments of all the departments that contributed effectively to this proposed mid-year report, and then finally, the requested action, which I will walk through very methodically because these items of action are very important as we move forward for this fiscal year and the next fiscal year. All right, let's begin with the general economic outlook. In terms of providing this discussion, we should consider a number of economic indicators to give us a glimpse into the future. The first one, and a very important one, is the business cycle. This essentially is an examination of the fluctuation of economic activity that occurs during a given fiscal year. And the type of activity that we are focusing on primarily is expansion or business growth or economic growth. The flip side of expansion is contraction, which leads to a recession. For the last 4 or 5 years, the economy has been in a position of economic growth. To give you some data, in 2011, the growth rate, the national growth rate, was 1.6%. In 2012, it was 2.3%. In 2013, it was 2.2%. In 2014, 2.4%. In 2015, approximately 2.4%. And although the growth rate at the present time is 1.4%, the projections by both the Federal Reserve and by California are that we should be well over 2% and possibly 3% by the end of this fiscal year, or the next fiscal year, as I should say. All in all, that tells us that we are in a period of sustained economic growth. And when you have sustained economic growth, that contributes to the kind of economic activity that produces value from which we have the financial resources in order to plan our budget. The next economic indicator that we should take a look at is interest rates. The prime rate at the present time is 3.5%. Last year, it was 3.25%. So it's a 0.25% increase with regard to the cost of borrowing money. The Fed fund rate is at 0.50%. That's up from 0.25%. So generally, interest rates are relatively low or lower comparatively speaking, which means that the cost of financing is relatively low in order to sponsor business and economic activity. In terms of the inflation rate, the present time inflation is 2.2%. Last year it was less than 1%. It was 0.1%, and the year before was 1.6%. So inflation has increased, but still it's relatively low with relatively low interest rates. With regard to unemployment, the federal unemployment rate right now is 6.1%. In California, it's 5%, and in Tulare County, it's 12.1%. Another important economic indicator is building permits. That's a measure of the type of economic activity that produces value, particularly assessed valuation. And as you all know, and as this report will relate, almost 2/3 of the funds that flow into Tulare County, the unincorporated area, are from assessed valuation, the property tax. And one important measure with regard to assessed valuation is building permits. And I'm happy to report that the building permit activity for the past 2 years is excellent for this branch of government. Specifically, during fiscal year 14-15, $126 million in new building value was conferred upon Tulare County. At the present time, through the end of February, through the first 2 quarters, for fiscal year 15-16, $204 million has been conferred on Tulare County, with $66 million being conferred in February alone. This is an indicator that Tulare County is on the move, and I must say that RMA, through its economic development program, and in particular the Building and Housing Division, through the leadership of Dennis Lehman, have contributed mightily to this manifestation of growth, which only benefits the residents as well as the departments of Tulare County. So as this presentation will move forward, economic development continues to be the game changer with regard to producing new assessed valuation from which the financing sources were down to Tulare County, and thus that's how we build our spending plan. That's how we build our budget. So all in all, that's the economic indicators, but what's the outlook? Looking ahead, there's cautious optimism. And the reason for that relates to the stock market. There are a number of reports that look at the stock market very, very closely. And these business reports run the gamut from an overvaluation of the stock market ranging from 6% to 50%. When you have an overvalued stock market, there is a danger of a bubble. If you remember in 2000 with the dot-com bubble, if you remember in 2007, there was the credit bubble. That all is a reflection of overvaluation in the market. So we are going to watch this very closely, such that because of the current volatility in the stock market and the overvaluation that is occurring, we should be cautiously optimistic and focus on a budget plan that considers sustainability. What is sustainability? Essentially, sustainability means that government is able to cover its revenues and expenditures out of its recurring revenues without borrowing and without undue reliance on intergovernmental transfers, either from subventions or from grants. So as we move forward with regard to building our budget, we have to keep in mind the sustainability concept, because there is the possibility that there could be a market correction resulting in a loss of value and a possible contraction. All right, having gone through the economic outlook, now we turn to the governor's proposed state budget. I'll go through the general features of that budget and then drill down into various governmental functional categories such as administration of justice, agriculture, environment and natural resources, government finance and operations, health and human services, and housing, land use, and transportation. All right, turning to the governor's proposed budget in general. The proposed budget is $122.6 billion. It's an increase of $6.5 billion, or 5.6% higher than last fiscal year. The proposed budget is balanced, and the proposed budget reduces the state's existing liabilities. An example is the triple flip or the economic recovery bonds, which I will get into as part of this presentation. Very importantly, though, consistent with Proposition 2 that was adopted by the voters, this budget projects an $8 billion rainy day fund balance as of June 30th, 2017. In addition, another important feature of the governor's budget is that in November 2014, the voters approved the Water Quality, Supply, and Infrastructure Improvement Act of 2014. And as such, this budget proposes an additional $465 million in support of the Central Valley Project Improvement Act and the San Joaquin River Settlement, among other initiatives. And that's in keeping with Proposition 2, also approved by the voters. All right, turning now to the administration of justice. The proposed budget updates revenue assumptions for 2011 realignment programs and details the base and growth assumptions. Specifically, in connection with AB 109, the funding is estimated to be $1.07 billion in base and $96.8 million in growth. Also, the Citizens Option for Public Safety, Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act, Rural County Sheriff Program, among others, should receive a guaranteed funding level of $489.9 million with healthy growth funding. Finally, with regard to SB 678, the funding is estimated at $129.7 million for probation departments, which amounts to a $4.7 million increase above the previous funding level. With respect to the next category, which is not administration of justice, agriculture, environment, and natural resources, there are a number of key features to highlight for you. First, cap and trade. The proposed budget appropriates $3.1 billion, for example, $100 million to CAL FIRE for forest health and tree mortality, and $150 million for Climate Communities Program. May I deviate for a moment just to say, Mr. Chairman and board members, that as part of the Forest Health and Tree Mortality Program, the County Administrative Office has been working very closely with the Resource Management Agency and other local partners to work on a plan addressing tree mortality, and that plan will be presented for your review, consideration, and approval either in late April or early May, where a key component of that program will be cost and determining what will be the sources of funding in order to finance that cost. Turning now to the California Water Action Plan. This budget proposes $170.3 million in various investments to continue the 5-year roadmap towards sustainable water management. With respect to groundwater management, $2.45 million is included in the budget for the Department of Water Resources to update data and repair monitoring sites. Finally, with regard to the emergency drought response, the governor's budget includes $323.1 million on a one-time basis to continue the critical drought response efforts. And I should say the Resource Management Agency and the Health and Human Services Agency, working with this office and with your board, has done an outstanding effort to acquire that funding in order to be responsive during this drought. Turning now to government finance and operations. With respect to the redevelopment dissolution process, the administration anticipates, the state administration, that in fiscal years 2015-16 and 16-17, the counties will receive an additional $684 million in general purpose revenues from SB 107 implementation with respect to redevelopment. We don't know actually how much that will be, but there will be a true-up, and probably next fiscal year we should receive this additional funding, or our share of this additional funding. Turning now to the economic recovery bonds and the triple flip. This was in response, if you will, to the dot-com recession in 2004. Economic recovery bonds were sold in the marketplace, and as of August 2015, the final payment of the economic recovery bonds was made and ended the triple flip. Again, the triple flip was a mechanism by which debt service on bonds was paid in terms of the property tax and the sales tax being shifted in order to address educational needs and also to ensure that local government received its fair share with regard to this source of funding. So this funding will end. We don't know exactly how the true-up will end. However, there should be additional funding flowing to the county next fiscal year. Turning now to Health and Human Services. In connection with Medi-Cal General Fund, the governor's budget is estimated to increase 8%, or $1.4 billion, to add to the $19.1 billion which is allocated for the Medi-Cal function. Turning now to the county Medi-Cal administration, the governor's proposed budget proposes to add $169 million for the current fiscal year. With regard to CalWorks, AB 85 redirects indigent care cost savings from the Affordable Care Act to CalWorks, and that estimated savings will be $564.5 million in fiscal year 16-17, plus a reimbursement of $151.7 million from a correction that occurs from the fiscal year 2013-2014 budget. Continuing with Health and Human Services, with regard to the in-home support services, the proposed budget restores a current reduction of 7% in service hours for beneficiaries at a state cost of $236 million. In connection with health care reform implementation, the proposed budget includes net costs of $4 billion for mandatory Medi-Cal expansion and $14.1 billion for optional Medi-Cal expansion. Finally, in terms of the governor's budget, the housing, land use, and transportation area covers two major components, an infrastructure plan and the highway user tax account. With regard to the infrastructure plan, the budget proposes investing $1.7 billion in state infrastructure in fiscal year 16-17 and $3.6 billion annually for 10 years for transportation funding and reform. With regard to the highway user tax account, the revenues will decrease by more than 25% in 2 years. This is the primary source of funding for local streets and road maintenance. And as a result, this office has tasked RMA with the activity to evaluate what will be the fiscal effects on the road fund with regard to these decreases in the HUTA revenue. All right, now we turn to the proposed budget protocol plan. As I say, traditionally, these elements of this plan has been approved by the board, and we propose to continue with the strength of that plan, plus make some refinements as we move ahead. First and foremost, historically, normal revenues will be budgeted, in which case conservative revenue estimates will be budgeted. 2, proceeds from the sale of assets will be designated for future capital needs. 3, one-time funds will be used for one-time purposes when setting departmental budget targets. 4, any structural increases to departmental budgets should reflect due diligence analysis of recurring revenue opportunities and operational efficiencies. In other words, before we add to the permanent structure of a departmental budget, the departments and the agencies will be tasked with the duty to conduct due diligence analysis to see what revenues can support the structural increases, and secondly, what operational efficiencies can occur such that the general fund will not be the first line in order to support that structural increase. And the proposed mid-year budget is a shining example of how the departments drill down within and look for operational efficiencies to pay for this mid-year budget such that there is no net county cost. Finally, fiscal sustainability of proposed budgets will be assured, especially in light of the stock market volatility and the unpredictability with regard to what will occur in the future. Even though our budget should be balanced, and a balanced budget will always be proposed to your board, we should be considering prudently what will happen the next year and the next year so that we don't run out of money by merely presenting a budget that is balanced. All right, now we turn to the mid-year report. There are a number of elements that will be discussed, so we have a mini table of contents, if you will, with regard to the proposed report. The first one is the fiscal outlook for Tulare County. The next one is the California Consumer Price Index, or the CCPI, because that is a function of assessed valuation. Then we will drill down into the local assessed value for Tulare County and give you a relative comparative analysis of where we've been and where we're going. Next, we will discuss the sales and use tax allocation, the Proposition 172 public safety sales tax, and then we will drill down into the mid-year budget review. We will look at a general fund summary, revenues and expenditures, and we will have some charts to illustrate where we've been and where we're going. There will be a general fund overview as we sit here today. Then there will be a review of the funds outside the general review. There will be a departmental budget overview for this mid-year report, and then finally, the budget development schedule. So let's turn now to the fiscal outlook for 2016-2017. And this is important because this fiscal outlook will guide prudently how we structure our proposed budget for the next fiscal year. First, as indicated previously, there will be cautious optimism, even though we are still in a period of expansion or growth. There are some indicators that suggest caution. So, will we continue the steady recovery from the Great Recession, or will there be a downturn? Although a downturn is not expected, we have been in a period of 7 years of growth. We've surpassed the rule of thumb, which is 5 years, so we should be prudent and be prepared. And again, the reason is the stock market volatility, and there probably will be a correction in 2016. There has been slow but steady growth in the housing and non-housing markets. The statewide sales tax is growing, but at a moderate pace. The local sales tax is declining slightly, as I will explain. The local assessed valuation for next fiscal year will be flat, or it will experience marginal growth, and that's a function of the California Consumer Price Index, among other factors. And there are some budget impacts that we should take into serious consideration, and it relates to the implementation of various confidence levels with regard to our risk management funds. Essentially, a confidence level is a funding rate for cash reserves sufficient to pay all the claims in a given fiscal year. As a rule of thumb, a 95% confidence level is very strong and very conservative. 80% is an adequate confidence level. 70% is a marginal confidence level, and 60% is an inadequate confidence level. And I take this moment to walk you through the various degrees of confidence because we have a number of funds which we are working on and which are under review for which we need to rebuild up those confidence levels. And as a result, that will be a function of a budgetary impact as we set rates for various forms of insurance that could affect the departmental operations. All right, turning now to the California Consumer Price Index. As you can see, whoops. All right.
Going the wrong way.
I know. Melinda, what happened to the chart?
On 15.
All right, there we go. All right, this chart, I knew there would be a glitch sooner or later. All right, with regard to this chart, this shows the California Consumer Price Index. For next fiscal year, the Consumer Price Index for 16-17 is projected to be 1.525%. Last year, it was 1.9%. The year before, it was 0.4%. When looking at Prop 13 and when looking at our annual growth rate that is legally permissible, the maximum is 2% subject to the CPI. So we haven't made 2% growth with respect to the assessed valuation. If you look at the chart, fiscal year 2013 and 14 and 2012 and 13 was the last time we hit the 2% mark for the annual growth rate. So this year, compared to last year, we have a modest decline in the annual growth rate, which will affect our assessed valuation and the property tax receipts that would flow to the county. To give you a glimpse now of our local assessed value, we have three basic clusters. The first cluster is identified in green, the second cluster is identified in purple, and the third cluster is identified in yellow. The first cluster extends, which is in green, extends from 2010 to 2016. And in 2010, the assessed valuation locally in the county was $27,964,000. For 2016, it's projected to be $31,474,000,000. Well, when you take this period of time from 2010 to 2016, the average change was 1.5%. When you look at the second cluster in purple, and that ranges from 2006 to 2009, starting at 2006, the assessed valuation was $20 billion, and in 2009 it was $28 billion. The average rate of growth during that period of time was 10.4%, and now it's 1.5%. The third cluster, which is highlighted in yellow, extends from the period of 1996 to 2005, and in 1996, the assessed valuation in billions was $12,772,000. In 2005, it climbed all the way up to $18,962 million, for an average rate of growth during this period of 4.5%. So we've gone from 4.5% to 10.4% to an average growth rate of 1.5%, which, relatively speaking, is lower. Now we turn to sales and use tax allocation. In 2015, the sales and use taxes are $8.9 million. Compared to last year, there were $9.1 million. So there is a slight decline with regard to the sales taxes. Although there has been a significant increase from 2010, which was $6.3 million, still compared to last year, we are experiencing a predicted decline in sales taxes to Tulare County. With regard to the Proposition 172, Public Safety 1/2 sales taxes, for 2016, $29 million is projected. Compared to last year, it was $30.5 million, so that's a reduction of about $1.5 million. When you look at where we've come from in 2006, it was $21.8 million, and we've climbed all the way up to $30.5 last year and to $29 million.
Mr. Chairman, Mike, I think as I was looking at that, I thought, probably a lot of that's attributed to the price of gasoline. Because when you look at gas taxes, I mean, the price of gas has dropped so much per gallon, and so the tax people are paying on that gasoline obviously has dropped considerably too. And that probably accounts, because when you think about it, as people have more money in their pocket, they can spend it on something else. But when you got to buy gas to get to and from work, you got to buy gas. Other expenditures may be more elective, but when you're paying for fuel, oftentimes it's usually not elective. It's what you've got to spend. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. A little less revenue, but I think stronger for the consumer in that they have more money in their pockets they can spend to pay down debt or to do something else with their funds.
Very good. Turning now to the mid-year budget review. Most importantly, with regard to the general fund departments, it is projected that the departments will be at or below their allocated targets. In other words, they will meet their budget expectations. There's one exception, the miscellaneous criminal justice, because of the recent event with regard to extensive prosecutions and the need for conflict counsel. That has necessitated an influx of, at least at this time, $250,000 and maybe another $250,000. So that was over the projection for the budget for this fiscal year, but with the exception of miscellaneous criminal justice, all the departments are expected to meet their targets. With regard to general fund revenues at this time, 37% has been collected, which is 5% lower than last year. I will have a chart that walks through that and will explain why there is that reduction. In addition, general fund expenditures are 51% expensed or obligated, and this is 1% lower than last year. Finally, with regard to our structural carryover fund balance, it is projected that we will be above what is necessary to meet our fiscal year end, which is $6 million. All right, let's look at our general fund budget of 5-year summary. On the first row, we have 2015-16, which is the current fiscal year. Our budget for the general fund is $709 million with 4,003 employees. In fiscal year 14-15, it was $674 million with 3,950 employees. During fiscal year 2013-14, it was $667 million or 3,958 employees. During fiscal year 2012-13, it was $637 million with 3,963 employees. And during fiscal year 2011 and 12, the budget was $598 million with 3,800 employees. So you've seen gradual growth in the general fund budget and also growth, modest growth in employees. All right, turning now to our mid-year general fund revenues over the last 5 years. But let's turn and look to the column to my right, which is fiscal year 15-16. The revenues were projected to be $684 million. At the present time, $256 million has been recognized in revenue, or 37%. When you compare it, going left to right to prior fiscal years, this is pretty much in line with the revenues that have been recognized during mid-year. When you compare this year's budget in terms of revenues with last year's, you will see that last year, during 14-15, the revenues received at this time during mid-year were $276 million. This year, they're $256 million with a $20 million differential. After drilling down and consultation, the reason for this variance primarily is that in the HHSA budget, there is a projection of a $20 million decrease in revenues at this time. However, after consultation with the HHSA director and assistant director for fiscal operations, based upon the Affordable Care Act and conservative budgeting, it is fully expected that by the end of the fiscal year, or on the back end, as I like to say, that there will be additional funding that will make up that difference from the Affordable Care Act. In addition, there's going to be some direct claim pays by the state, so between an additional infusion of funding to the realignment fund for this purpose, as well as for direct pay of claims, whatever differential was suffered here will be regained. Turning now to our general fund expenditures. And again, this is a chart that shows the last 5 years. For this fiscal year, 15-16, at this time, we have expensed or obligated about 51% of our expenditures, which is $360 million. This is well in line with the percentages compared to the last 4 fiscal years, so there's no reason for concern there. Turning now to the general fund. With regard to our general fund reserve, during this budget year, we've increased our reserves by $1 million to $25 million in reserves. With regard to general plan implementation, $1.2 million was obligated, and this is important because this funds the community plan updating activity. And as all of you know, during the past 2 fiscal years, there have been 7 community plans within the corridors primarily that have been updated, which has led to increased economic activity because we moved from a very extensive and expensive discretionary permit process to a ministerial building permit process, which means it gets the projects in, out, and faster to building permit. And why is that important, as we discussed? Because the building permits lead to assessed valuation. So through this allocation of funding, supported by your board, we have tried to change the game and increase assessed valuation by working through the community plan updating and building permit process. In addition, probation security cameras and equipment in the amount of $1 million was contributed. In addition, the county building improvements and remodels of $3 million was provided in this budget. With regard to county parks and restoration, $1 million was provided in this budget. Additional funds for new jail facilities in the amount of $1.5 million was provided. Importantly, a pension stabilization fund was created, and $1 million was contributed there. This will give me an opportunity to deviate or detour slightly with regard to pensions and retirement. During our next meeting, we expect to have a complete report by the retirement board staff that will deal with Tulare County's pension as well as retirement costs. To give you some background, at the present time, the retirement fund is funded at an 85% confidence level. That's pretty good based upon the rule of thumb that we discussed. However, there's an unfunded actuarial liability exceeding $200 million at this time. The employer contribution for this budget year was $34 million. That's up by $2 million from last year. To try to address the employer contribution rate, as well as addressing the unfunded actuarial liability, this year the Retirement Board has adopted a 18-year fixed plan by which to retire that debt, as opposed to a rolling plan that had been the approach previously. So you're going to get a report very soon which will focus the discussion on what is the status or the condition of the retirement fund, where are we headed towards funding the unfunded liability, as well as what will be the increased employer contributions which will affect our general fund budget in the future. The last point with regard to the general fund overview addresses the workers' compensation fund. Through the prior CAO and your board, approximately $2 million has been contributed each year in order to try to address the underfunding of the workers' compensation fund. As you recall, borrowing had occurred during the Great Recession in order to try to help the county with regard to a number of functions, including with vehicle replacements. Well, we have to pay that money back. And one way of looking at that is to evaluate all of our risk management insurance funds and see if we can put together an approvable plan that is fair, equitable, and reasonable, that will allow a shifting of resources from another risk management fund to help restore the fund balance in workers' comp. And that's important because as we rebuild the workers' compensation fund, we have to set rates. And those rates will apply to all the departments. And even though the CAO has endeavored to capture or to cover any of those swings in rates, it still is an impact on the general fund, because if the departments don't pay it, the fund balance will pay it. So the bottom line is there will be an increase in rates, or there will be an increase in the amount of general fund financial resources in order to address this problem. Now we turn to funds outside the general fund. May I say that with regard to the fire department fund, the library fund, and the internal services funds, they're all in very good shape. There are adequate fund balances, and funds are being used in order to provide the services that are necessary for the residents of Tulare County. With regard to the General Liability Insurance Fund, at the present time, the confidence level in this fund is 99%. It's in a very strong position. But as a result, there's approximately $8 million of excess reserves that we have that we are analyzing right now as to how we can redistribute in order to assist other funds that may need that help. With regard to workers' comp, we're working our way towards a 70% confidence level because we have to address approximately $13 million in the refunding of that program. With regard to property insurance, that is very well funded. There are reserves of $500,000 in that fund. With regard to the medical malpractice insurance fund, that is very well funded to the point that we have additional reserves, and we will look at addressing how to redirect those funds to other funds that may need that assistance. But again, this will all be a function of working closely with the departments, with the auditor, with the state auditor's office to ensure that we have a plan that is fair, equitable, as well as reasonable. Now let's turn to the mid-year budget. It is important for me to say at the outset with regard to the proposed mid-year budget that with regard to all of the project activity or with regard to the funds that have been allocated in order to address the mid-year budget, there is no net county cost. No net county cost whatsoever. There were adequate funds within which to address these interim needs that the departments presented to the CAO at this time. So when you look at the overall expenditures that affected the general fund for this proposed mid-year budget, there was approximately $650,000, out of which there was no net county cost. So how is that distributed? As your board knows, a very important strategic goal is to provide public safety and security. And through this mid-year budget process, the Sheriff's Office garnered approximately $400,000 out of the mid-year process. That primarily went to the payment of body cameras, approximately $250,000. $100,000 went to personnel in terms of adding a new captain, and about $100,000 for various fixed assets in order to carry out its public safety function. Turning to the district attorney's office, as a result of the reorganization, there was absolutely no net county cost. And I want to compliment the district attorney working very closely with the CAO through its due diligence such that it accomplished its reorganization without costing the county $1. So my compliments to the district attorney in working very closely with us as well as HRD. County council, there was approximately $85,000 in additional expenditures through a reorganization of positions, as well as funding for an organizational development consultant. Turning to Health and Human Services, there was approximately $300,000 in funding associated there, but there is absolutely no net county cost because all of that funding was grant funded. Turning to the Resource Management Agency, there was approximately $30,000 in various reorganizational position costs, and as a result, RMA was able to strengthen its economic development and fiscal operations so as to deliver more public value as part of our budget process. Human Resources and Development had a number of position changes resulting in no net county cost. The County Administrative Office also went through a reorganization where there was approximately $2,000 in additional cost, but the net effect is that there will actually be a reduction of $143,000 in net county cost through the various adds and deletes that were part of the reorganization that your board approved previously, which is being implemented today, if so approved by your board. In addition, with regard to other departments, IT department had additional costs in $273,000 in order to carry out and complete a number of programs dealing with software projects. So that's the long and the short of it. It's approximately $625,000. There's absolutely no net county cost, and a great deal of that is going to a very important strategic goal, which is to provide public safety and security to our residents. Now we turn to the budget development schedule. It is proposed that the final budget hearing materials are to go to the Board of Supervisors and the public on September 2nd. The recommended budget will go to the Board of Supervisors on September 2nd. The final budget hearing will be set for September 13th. The resolution with all budget or all personnel changes goes to the Board of Supervisors on September 30th. The adopted budget book is slated to go to the Board of Supervisors and the public on November 22nd. And finally, the adopted budget book to the State of California is proposed to be delivered on December 1st. Looking ahead, it's important to summarize an approach that your board has approved recently with regard to strategic management. As your board well knows, in 2006 you adopted the Tulare County Strategic and Business Management Plan, in which there were 4 goals: public safety and security, economic well-being, quality of life, and organizational performance. And as a result of the chair's recent State of the County address, he has tasked the CAO to bring back to the board this year a dusting off, if you will, of this proposed business management plan, where I can commit to you that these 4 goals will be maintained and strengthened. One of the budgetary aspects that needs to be stressed with regard to strategic management is that the strategic goals, these 4 goals, if you will, have to be in alignment with the budget goals. And so drilling down, there's a 3-part approach in terms of, well, how do we really get to the alignment of these 4 good strategic goals with the budget plan that will be recommended to your board for consideration and approval. And the three-part plan is as follows. First, the departments, in conjunction with the CAO, must conduct that necessary due diligence to determine whether it's a go or no go. And I think the overriding factor that should be applied is sustainability. In other words, even though we can pay for what is being requested, the question is whether we can continue to keep paying for that based upon recurring revenues as opposed to one-time revenues. So after that due diligence process is carried out, the next task is to prioritize the goals. And you rank them based upon the availability of funding. And if those goals can't be implemented, then the third aspect of that alignment process should be the reasonable phasing of those goals with a feasible implementation plan. So again, due diligence, prioritizing, and phasing, and that's how we get to yes with available resources. So looking at fiscal sustainability and budget growth, as indicated, with respect to assessed value, it is predicted that there will be a flat to a marginal increase in assessed valuation. With regard to sales and use tax, there will be a marginal decrease. With regard to workers' compensation, we have a refunding of cost obligation to carry out. With regard to retirement costs, there will be an annual increase in the employer's contribution, and addressing unfunded liability will be an issue. Finally, the drought impacts to the economy and the general fund have to be considered. Although you had an excellent report a number of meetings ago from the assessor where there was an evaluation and there was no immediate impact to assessed valuation with regard to the drought, we still have to be cautious with regard to what is the effect of the drought on business activity, which could cause a slowdown in growth or in the taxes that result from that growth. So, with regard to a proposed sustainability and budget plan for this fiscal year, number one, one-time funding for one-time purposes should be emphasized. Due diligence, prioritizing, and phasing should apply to structural budget increases. And thirdly, in order to try to assist, rather than sit back in a reactive format, rather we propose to be proactive and change the game by helping to increase assessed valuation and other general purpose revenue through strategic management and economic development. And as I illustrated to this board previously, the numbers are in the building permits, and we are steadily moving in a positive direction in order to try to influence that game so that there is additional revenue flowing into our general fund from which we can address the departmental needs and the services to the general public. So we're almost at the end. And it's very important. This is the most important slide as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Chairman, because it's an opportunity for me to acknowledge and thank so many that have contributed so much to get such a great deal done. First and foremost to the Board of Supervisors for contributing mightily to the conservative, strong fiscal condition of this county, to the County Administrative Office, in particular the budget team that have worked many long hours during the weekdays and on the weekends, and that consists of Debbie Vaughn, Paul Guerrero, Craig Wunderjam, as well as Melinda Benton. They have contributed a great deal in order to get us to this very positive report that is being presented today. Also, I've got to thank the Human Resources and Development Department in general and its director, who worked very closely with this office in order to get the numbers right, get the positions right, so that we have the funding and have the positions available in order to deliver the public value that is so essential to the residents of Tulare County. And then I have to thank all the other county departments. And although there are over 20 of them, what I thought I would do is group all the functions to highlight the wonderful work that is being provided by these departments in the areas of public safety, law, administration of justice, in the areas of assessment, accounting, auditing, public finance and investment, in the areas of agriculture, planning, public works and solid waste, in the areas of health, human, social, and environmental services, and finally, in the areas of general services, capital projects, and internal department services. This represents the functions within which the county family of departments continue to not only be committed to excellence, but to deliver service at a level of excellence. In conclusion, and I really mean it now, if I may, Mr. Chairman, there are 6 items that I would like to read very carefully, methodically, because these requested action items are so important to the mid-year budget process. But before I say that, let me say, based upon the strong financial condition of the county at this time and projected, as well as the budget protocol plan that your board has adopted time and time again, it is respectfully submitted that I request that 1, you receive the mid-year budget report for fiscal year 2015-16. 2, you approve the proposed schedule for preparation and adoption of the fiscal year 2016-17 budget, which incorporates a rollover budget as the operating budget, including the capital projects budget for the period between July 1, 2016 and adoption of the FY 2016-17 budget, and that requires a 4/5 vote. Number 3, adopt the personnel resolution to add, reclassify, delete, and amend positions, and approve the required job specifications and salary adjustments stemming from the mid-year report, subject to completion of meet and confer. And if I could say, based upon information supplied to me by the HRD director, meet and confer has occurred, and it has occurred successfully. 4, approve the capital asset purchase of 2 Blade servers, $30,000, 3 Cisco Blade servers, $35,000, 1 mainframe data storage array, $75,000, 1 hardware for security event management, $33,100, 1 uninterrupted power supply, $40,000, 3 vehicles, $70,500, 1 forklift, $18,000, and 1 trash compactor, $28,000. We're almost there. 5, waive the bid process and authorize the purchasing agent to obtain purchase quotes in order to secure delivery of 3 vehicles prior to June 30th, 2016. And finally, 6, authorize the auditor, controller, treasurer, tax collector, with concurrence of the county administrative officer, to process any budget adjustments stemming from the mid-year report, and that requires a 4/5 vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you for an excellent mid-year, mid-budget report. Any comments from the board?
Couple quick things, if I can. Looking back to number 4, I think this shows how open our CAO is here. Every one of these items is within his and the purchasing department's spending authority, but he brought it and listed it here as a single item. I appreciate seeing that. I think that's going above and beyond the call. I folded real quick questions for you. As we look back, all the way back to slide 5, the state's budget, they're proposing a 5.6% increase, and I think that's very, very large. I don't think we're looking at, if you had to project a percentage increase, what would you be thinking we would be looking at percentage-wise as a county?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Cox. It's too early to tell, and I'll say why, even though I will answer your question. We don't have fund balance information. We don't know how much is going to fall back to fund balance, but I would like, in keeping with your board, to be conservative. Not to be aggressive because of the sustainability concern which we have with regard to the overvaluation of the stock market, which could lead to a bursting of the bubble. Hence, conservative.
I brought that up. I thought 5.6 was very, very high. And then addressing the reserves, this board's taken a position, and I'm going to ask you, do we consider all reserves and fund balances one-time monies? At the end of the day, do we look at all those as one-time monies?
The answer is no. The reserves are just that, for reserves. That would be, first of all, moving money out of the reserves is subject to board approval, and consistent with the philosophy of a reserve, that should only occur in the event of an emergency. Now, with regard to fund balance, the fund balance is part of the adopted budget. You have revenues, expenditures, and what is not allocated falls to the fund balance. So it's all budgeted. However, we need to be careful when we project the fund balance for next year because we are not projecting an increase in assessed valuation or sales tax, so our fund balance will probably be less.
That's what I was wanting to bring out. 2 more things, if you would, Mr. Chair, real quick. We're increasing our general fund reserves to $25 million. And I know we've had this discussion in the past. Supervisor Worthy has been very strong on this. And if you would refresh my memory, I believe it's our goal to get to $30 million within a relatively, and we've thrown out different numbers, but we've increased that from 20 to 25 now. And it's my recollection that we're looking towards the $30 million mark in the next several budget cycles.
Well, I think our long-term objective, as I recall, was something more like on the order of $50 million, given the size of our budget.
Taking baby steps, sir.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to get there one step at a time, and as we repay back what we need to in terms of workers' comp and these other things that we need to pay, that will, of course, sort of slow the process. But ultimately, given the size of our budget, a $50 million reserve is not a large number. I mean, it is a large number, taken by itself. But when you compare it to the size of our general fund, it is not a large reserve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and supervisors. If I may go down memory lane, I remember when I was back here in 07, 08 handling the budget, the reserves were $20 million.
Right.
Today they're $25 million. I can commit to you that we will endeavor to commit at least $1 million per budget year to grow us methodically and steadily towards the higher number of $30 million. And as you rightly point out, we do have other internal operational commitments that we need to do in order to really tighten up our fiscal house. So it may take a little bit longer to get beyond $30 million, but we will commit at least $1 million every year to replenishing that reserve, or increasing that reserve, rather.
Last thing on slide 28, you talk about the retirement costs, annual and unfunded costs. I said on the retirement board we did vote to implement an 18-year plan which would specifically address that unfunded costs. And working together as a team, and we had the retirement subcommittee that we worked on, not only able to address that unfunded cost, but we're able to look at also the long-term contribution that the county would make and keep that somewhat flat. So we are paying $2 million more this year. The next couple of years, it'll go up another $2 million or so. But after that third year, we have a leveling off to where we're at about $40 million or 41. And that was a goal also, was to be able to have a predictable, flat contribution. I think we're able to obtain that, even though the 18 years stretches that unfunded cost out quite a ways. We're able to address that. I'm glad that we did that.
If I could just make one quick comment on that particular issue, though that concept of the 18-year amortization applies to the debt today. We still, because of our smoothing process, have, according to my calculations, it's either 3 or 4 more years of losses that were in 2009 that have not yet been recognized. As those are recognized, what essentially happens in this process we've started is you end up with a series of notes. So we have a note for today at $18 million. Next year, if we have another shortfall, which is anticipated we will have because of the smoothing process, we'll have another note on that, and another note on the following one, another note on the following. The end result is that we're going to see ourselves go from an 85% funding ratio to something less than that. So I look forward to considering other options about, rather than paying our retirement board 7.65% interest on $200 million, that we look at some other mechanism whereby we would be paying more of a market rate on that debt rather than being paying what we are paying, which is very, very, very high.
There's work to do.
I was just going to make a comment. Thank you, Mr. CAO, for a great mid-year budget report. I think that your whole presentation, especially the beginning, dedicated to talking about the economic climate that we're dealing with, both locally, statewide, and nationally. I think it's very important that we really do take a good look at the big picture, and really adopt our philosophy accordingly. I think that you see why this county's in the financial position that it's in, because of conservative budgeting, conservative revenue projections, and definitely overstating expenses more so than revenues. I think that we're doing the exact opposite of what our state is doing in terms of increasing the general fund the way that they are. And I look forward to continuing to implement the plans and the growing of the reserves, and taking care of really the long-term needs of this county as much as we can through short-term measures. So I appreciate all of your efforts, and I look forward to the upcoming fiscal year, and thanks for a great report. And if there's no other comments from board members or members of the public, I would like to move for approval of this mid-year budget report and all requested actions.
Moved by Supervisor Vanderpool, second by Supervisor Wordley. Vote is unanimous. Thank you, Mr. CAO, for a great report. Okay, that completes our in-session board meeting. Council, we have need for closed session.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there is a need for closed session. Items A and B are off calendar, and we do anticipate a report out.
Okay, thank you.
This is Jennifer M. Flores, Chief Deputy County Counsel. The Board of Supervisors, for item H, directed legal counsel to defend and authorize the defense of individually named defendants, including those to be named later, with a reservation of right, in the case of Albert Hernandez v. Tulare County Correctional Facility et al., case number VCU 264158. The adverse party is Albert Hernandez pro per. This case involves an allegation of violation of civil rights. The roll call vote was motioned to approve by Supervisor Pete Vanderpool and seconded by Supervisor Phil Cox. The motion was unanimously approved. Item L. It's L. L. Okay. The Board of Supervisors, for item L, authorized legal counsel to enter a case as an amicus curiae. The case is Wallace v. County of Stanislaus, Court of Appeals case number F0068068. The adverse parties are Plaintiff Wallace and similarly situated employees. This case involves the court's elimination of an intent or animus requirement when finding that employers are guilty of disability discrimination. The roll call vote was motioned by Supervisor Steve Worthley and seconded by Supervisor Alan Ishida. The vote was unanimously approved.